What's up, guys? Welcome back to the channel, and today we're going to do something that I wanted to do last year, but I didn't feel like there was enough to talk about to do it. But this year, 2025, has been a wild one for Nintendo, and I wanted to go through their 2025 and just sort of give a retrospective / report card for the 2025 year for the Big N, because obviously a lot of stuff went down, a lot of stuff that we've talked about over the course of the year on the channel, but I want to just sort of compile it in one video, talk about what happened, talk about if it was a satisfying and exciting 2025, and then at the end, look ahead to 2026. And I think it'll be interesting to talk about if this year met our expectations, because I feel like a lot of people were really excited for 2025 for Nintendo because we assumed that there would be a new console launching. Of course, that did happen, but I think it was a little more unconventional than we were expecting. I'm not going to do any more rambling in the intro because I have a hard out in 42 minutes because I can't miss the next episode of Survivor. R-I-Z-G-O-D, Rizgod, baby. Let's go. Anyway, Nintendo's 2025 was a wild one. So first I want to go through the timeline and talk about every key event that happened for Nintendo this year. And the first key date is January 16th, 2025, which is a day that will live in infamy for Nintendo and specifically the Nintendo Switch 2, because we had two things happen on January 16th. The first, and of course the more important, was Donkey Kong Country Returns HD launching for the Nintendo Switch. And I want to say real quick, for each game Nintendo released this year, I've compiled the Metacritic scores and the backlogged aggregate score. So this will give us an idea of the critical and sort of fan reception to these games Nintendo released in 2025. For those who don't know, Backlogged is the letterboxd of video games. People are always reviewing and rating and sorting and cataloging games on that website daily. I have an account on there that I link in the description of every video, but given my follower count right now and how low it is, it seems none of you have dropped me a follow on that website, which is fine. You know, it's not YouTube, it's a different website. You might not have an account, but if you do, drop me a follow. Maybe I'll follow you back. But in all seriousness, I think Backlogged is a really cool website, and you can see the litany of reviews I've done that didn't get made into videos or have yet to be made into videos on that website. It's a nice little companion to the channel, which, look, making a video takes so much time. Writing a review on Backlog takes a lot less time. So it's a nice little creative outlet for me. In all seriousness, I think these two scores will give us a good idea of the general reception for these games released in 2025. And for Donkey Kong Country Returns HD, it had a Metacritic score of 77 and a backlog score of 3.82, which is not too terrible for a remaster that was pretty bare bones, I believe done by Forever Entertainment, which people don't exactly love. I did pick up this game day one. It was gifted to me by my lovely mother for Christmas, so I didn't actually pay for it myself. Probably wouldn't have spent $60 on the game otherwise, but I was really excited to hop back into DK Country Returns HD because it's a terrific 2D platformer, and in my opinion, is better than Tropical Freeze. I know that's a hot take. I think they're about equal, but if I had to pick one, I would pick DK Returns. It's nostalgic for me. I loved playing it back on the Wii. The soundtrack is incredible. It's just a great game. It's still a great game on the Switch. Not much to say about it. But the other much less important thing that happened on January 16th was the Nintendo Switch 2 reveal. In the bright early morning hours of Thursday, January 16th, Nintendo dropped a video on their YouTube channel finally revealing the Nintendo Switch 2. Of course, this video didn't show much of anything. It just showed us what the console looked like, which we knew because we got a bunch of extensive, detailed leaks about a month before, and also that it played a new Mario Kart game, which we also kind of knew was going to be the case because EPD9 was taking so long after Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. Nonetheless, it was certainly a very exciting day for Nintendo, and it was also nice to learn that we would have a Switch 2 Direct in April, so we had something to look forward to over the next few months. You know, these cold winter months, they're hard to get through, so if you have that light at the end of the tunnel of a Switch 2 Direct, makes things go by a little quicker. All in all, January 16th is a day that is going to live in infamy alongside October 20th for Nintendo, and I'm glad to say I was there, 8 a.m., not sure why I woke up. I think I had a recitation that day at 9 a.m., so I had to wake up. And this is a funny side story. I had Nintendo of America and Nintendo of Japan, or NCL. I had both of their tweet notifications on. So I saw the tweet for the Switch 2, and it was like an update from Nintendo. And I was like, that has to be the Switch 2. And I clicked on it, and of course it was the trailer for the next console. Pretty cool stuff. We then jump 2 months into the future and get Xenoblade Chronicles X Definitive Edition, the remake-ster, whatever you want to call it, of the Wii U game. That is sort of a divisive game, I would say, in the Xenoblade fandom. It's a cult classic. Some people love it. Some people don't love it as much. I haven't played it. It's the only Xenoblade game I've yet to get to because I've been waiting for that Switch 2 patch, as I'm sure many have. But this one got an 87 on Metacritic and a 4.13 on Backlog. So by and large, people seem to really like it, even though the epilogue they added, I've heard, is not very good. Which I don't even know how they could mess it up, because it's not like Xenoblade X is a story-centric game anyway. It's more of a, combat and exploration type Xenoblade game from what I gather. But people in the hardcore Xenoblade community really dislike the new epilogue they added. Who knows? I haven't even touched the regular Xenoblade Chronicles X, so I can't talk about it. But other than that, people seem to really like it. I saw a lot of people who I don't even peg as Xenoblade fans necessarily, really into Xenoblade Chronicles X, like dropping 100+ hours into the game on the Switch, which was nice to see, right? Because it is not only a Xenoblade game, which already is sort of a niche appeal, but it's also Xenoblade X, which is sort of this weird, odd child, the fourth child alongside the main trilogy that people love. From what I gather, people don't seem to love X as much, but a 4.13 is a lot higher than Xenoblade Chronicles 2 on Backlog, so it definitely has its fans. Again, please give us Switch 2 patches for the Xenoblade games. What are we doing? Just a week after Xenoblade Chronicles X, though, we got the March 27th Nintendo Direct, and this was one that came out of nowhere, because we were expecting a Nintendo Direct in February, because they usually do that, and we thought there was some stuff they could mention ahead of the Switch 2 reveal. February came and went, and we didn't even get a partner showcase that month, and all hope seemed lost for some Switch 1 updates before the Switch 2 came out, until literally the last possible day. Thursday, March 27th was the last conceivable day that they could have done a March Nintendo Direct, right? Because they weren't going to do it the same week as the Switch 2 presentation, and at that point, they had never done a general Direct on a Friday, so it had to be Thursday, March 27th, and indeed it was. And as I said in my video about it, it might have been the weirdest Nintendo Direct we've ever had, at least general Nintendo Direct. There's been museum and theme park Directs, which are very weird just in concept, but in terms of main general Directs, I don't think there's been a weirder one than the March 27th, 2025 Nintendo Direct. In terms of Nintendo announcements, we did get that Metroid Prime 4 trailer that people really did not like. People thought it was super boring, and I can't say I disagree with that take. It was a very weird, awkwardly paced trailer. But we also got two pretty hype announcements for the hardcore fanbase, those being Rhythm Heaven Groove and Tomodachi Life Living the Dream, both games that are slated to come out sometime in 2026. I feel like in Nintendo communities, these were the two series that people wanted to see revive the most. Perhaps a series like F-Zero or Star Fox has more people begging for a new game or even a remaster, but Rhythm Heaven and Tomodachi Life were these niche series that were so beloved by Nintendo fans that seemed like relics of a bygone era for Nintendo, especially Tomodachi Life, which was such a weird game and used the 3DS's features in weird ways. It just didn't seem like we could ever get a new Tomodachi Life, but there it was, in the flesh, living the dream, coming to the Switch next year. And you could argue that Rhythm Heaven was the even weirder revival, because at least Tomodachi Life has a lot of popularity. Videos of Tomodachi Life go viral on TikTok and Twitter all the time. The 3DS game sold pretty darn well, but Rhythm Heaven has always been one of Nintendo's most niche franchises. Though it has its cult and critical appeal, it is nowhere near the popularity of even a Tomodachi Life. And yet, they're bringing that one back too, which is super cool to see. In a 2026 full of cool games, these might be my 2 games I'm most excited to play next year. I am so ready to dive back into these franchises. I can't believe we're getting revivals for both of them. So while for most people that was probably a bad Nintendo Direct, I saw a few videos of people saying it was just one of the worst Directs they've ever seen, which I can't blame you from a general perspective. For someone like me who was hoping for a new Rhythm Heaven or hoping for a new Tomodachi Life, I was over the moon. I had a lot of fun with that Direct. It would have been nice if those games came out a little earlier, having to wait a year for each of them most likely is a little bit rough. I've only waited a decade plus already. I think I can wait a little longer. Well, just 6 days after that Direct, we got another one. The Nintendo Switch 2 Direct on April 2nd. And this was the big one. It was so big that the stream for Nintendo of America crashed. It couldn't keep up with the amount of people watching to see what Nintendo had in store for the Switch 2. And auxiliary issues like technical snafus and price concerns aside, I think the Switch 2 Direct was a slam dunk. It gave us an incredible trailer for Mario Kart World, reveals of smaller titles like Switch 2 Welcome Tour and Dragon Drive, a bunch of Switch 2 additions, the Duskbloods, which came out of nowhere as a FromSoft game exclusive to the Switch 2, Kirby Air Riders coming back, directed by Masahiro Sakurai, and of course, DK Bonanza, a 3D Donkey Kong, seemingly made by the 3D Mario team. I know some people at the time thought, hey, maybe it's next level, maybe it's this, that, or the other, but we found out very quickly that no, it was the 3D Mario team, and I think it was pretty obvious from that trailer. The vibe, the aesthetics, the structure, it was very EPD8, and once we got our hands on it, I think it was unmistakable that it was them. But regardless of the Direct itself, it was just fun to experience a console launch in the state that I'm in. 20 years old, I have a YouTube channel where I talk about this stuff now, as opposed to 8 years ago when I was sneaking my iPad and watching that Switch presentation under my covers at 10 o'clock at night. These events are ones we only get to see so often for Nintendo, so it's pretty exciting to see one this year. Probably won't get one until, 2033, right? When we get the Switch 3 presentation. But I don't know. It was pretty exciting. Again, I think the Direct was terrific, price concerns aside. And it set us up for a June 5th launch for the Nintendo Switch 2. And that's exactly what it did. It launched on June 5th to roaring success. Even if people had issues with it online, the general public clearly did not, because at the time of recording, this console has sold 10.4 million units. The Switch 2 is an absolute juggernaut, and I guess this is the section for me to talk a little bit about just how I felt about the Switch 2 over these last 5 or so months, and I might do a whole video about this in January, talking about the first half year of the Switch 2, but I've really enjoyed my time with Nintendo's newest console. It has helped that they've had a lot of games come out for it, whether you enjoy them or not, and we'll get to them in more detail, but Mario Kart, DK, Prime 4, Kirby, Pokemon, Zelda, all of these big hitters in the first few months. I think we've gotten a little myopic about Nintendo's situation and people saying that this is a bad first few months for the Switch 2, which I think is crazy, just thinking about how the Wii U launched and how the 3DS launched with basically no games in the first 6 months of those life cycles. The Switch 2 is off to an incredible start, just in terms of raw output, not necessarily in terms of beloved games, although it does seem like there's a few beloved games already. Just in terms of the games they are publishing and releasing, Nintendo is off to a pretty darn good start, and that has made things really exciting as a content creator. Would I have liked there to be one more big game, Monolith Soft, Next Level, something like that? Of course I would have, but those games are going to come, and we'll talk about this more at the end of the video, but, those games are coming eventually, just maybe a little later than we would have hoped, but I think there's reason to be excited for the future of Switch 2, of course, and of course, I've loved a lot of the games Nintendo has released this year. DK Bonanza and Kirby Air Riders are two of my favorites of 2025. Mario Kart World is right there as well, and I'm sure I'll like Prime 4 despite all the drama around that game and its review scores. But anyway, let's get back to the timeline. June 5th, of course, was a big day because it wasn't just the launch of the Switch 2, but the launch of technically 4 games for Nintendo. The first one was the big kahuna, Mario Kart World, which is currently sitting at an 86 on Metacritic and a 3.87 on Backlogged. It's funny that I'm recording this video on December 3rd because we literally just got an update for Mario Kart World last night that was massive. They changed a bunch of intermission routes to make them more exciting. They added custom items. They added a tracker in the corner that shows you what song is playing. They let you turn the music louder if you want. And this is coming off an update a few months ago where they added tracking for P-switches and Peach medallions. Now, on the map, it will show you which ones you've already found, which allows you to sort of go to areas where you don't have a lot of icons to find P-switches or whatever and get closer to that 100% grind for Mario Kart World's free roam mode. And in my review, some of the stuff I just mentioned were the biggest issues I had with Mario Kart World. I like the intermission courses and I love Knockout Tour, but even I can admit that some of those water intermissions were pretty boring. They've changed that completely though. Haven't been able to play them myself, but from what I've seen from these videos, they're adding vines and boats and, different fish and stuff just flying up. They seem wild. Another issue I had with Mario Kart World was the lack of collectible tracking. They've improved that. Another issue I had with it was the lack of a jukebox player, and we're not quite there yet, but they have been making adjustments to how the music is presented to you. All of this is to say that Mario Kart World is far from a complete game, and you can blame Nintendo and EPD9 for not having it in a better state at launch, but honestly, I kind of think this game might have been rushed to hit the Switch 2's launch. This isn't something I've said on the channel, but reading a lot of the developer interviews with EPD9, not just the official Nintendo one, but I think they did some other ones before launch, they get asked about stuff like 200cc, and they're just like, oh, we can't say anything right now, but wink wink, like clearly they were just doing stuff on the fly, trying to get this game out for June 5th, and just committing to pushing updates whenever they could get them out in the future. Like, if the Switch 2 was delayed to November, would Mario Kart World be everything we had dreamed of? I think there's a chance, right? Just because of how many updates they've made over the last few months, and the fact that we are probably going to get a substantial DLC expansion for Mario Kart World next year. But ultimately, we know the Switch 2 was already delayed out of 2024. They weren't going to delay it again. And again, even if it was rushed and quote-unquote incomplete, I still loved what Mario Kart World gave us at launch and what it continues to give us to this day. I'll talk about this more in my Best Games of 2025 video, but the more I return to Mario Kart World, the more I like it. You would think it would be the opposite, right? The further removed from launch and the less the gleam is on Mario Kart World, the less I would like it. But it's really the opposite for me. I just come back to it, once every week or two, and I have even more fun than I expected, maybe even more fun than before. And these updates certainly are helping with that, but I think it's also the idea that we're 6 months removed from our expectations we had pre-launch, right? I did a video talking about why I was so hyped for Mario Kart World, and I think a lot of the things I talked about in that video came true, right? Just the fact that we were getting a new Mario Kart with an open world and new modes and all of this cool stuff. But there were also some things that I personally expected or hoped for from Mario Kart World, specifically relating to that open world, that we didn't get. Some sort of campaign or mission system or whatever, at least in a more detailed way than we got it with those P-switches. But now that the game is out and my expectations are sort of irrelevant, I can more appreciate what the open world is going for, and I can focus more on the fact that I love Knockout Tour and that the regular racing mode feels better than it ever has, some boring intermissions aside. Anyway, I'm not trying to get on a tangent here. My point is that Mario Kart World, in my opinion, is terrific. It's the best Mario Kart game they've ever done, and it's only going to get better. That's the exciting part. It's not going to get worse, probably. Well, I shouldn't say anything. I guess they did do that weird update that people hated a few months ago. But it's certainly not going to stagnate, right? And that's what's exciting about this. Even if it is just free updates for the next few years, or if it is that more substantial DLC expansion down the line, this game is going to rapidly evolve and improve over these next few years, and I can't wait to see what EPD9 does with it in 2026 and beyond. All right, well, I'm back. Like I said at the beginning of the video, Survivor did get in the way. Another good episode for the Riz God, though, so, we'll take what we can get. I am back the next day with a new wardrobe and a bit of a new decoration in the background. That's right, baby. Game of the Year 2025! Unironically, though, that magazine back there did help me unlock the costumes in Mario Kart World. I just got it yesterday, and I've been unlocking costumes in the game now that I would have had no idea how to do otherwise. Obviously, I could have just Googled, but I don't know. There's something a little nostalgic about using a physical magazine to do that and not just some IGN website that half the time isn't very helpful anyway. That aside, there was more games that came out for Nintendo on the 5th of June. The second most notable one, of course, being Nintendo Switch 2 Welcome Tour, which had a 54 on Metacritic and a 2.65 on Backlogged. That is the lowest, actually, that's wrong. It's not the lowest rated game on Metacritic for Nintendo this year, because there was a weird one that came out later. But in terms of console releases, this was the lowest rated game on Metacritic for Nintendo in 2025. And you can see why, right? Because it's not really a game. It is an instruction manual. I actually had a lot of fun with it. It's a pretty cool instruction manual. Obviously, it gets less cool when you think about that $10 price point. But also, what games are even $10 these days? Even indie games are $20 to $30. So the more I wrestled with the price, I feel like it should have been free, or at least included with NSO. But from a pure value standpoint, I don't think $10 is that crazy. I think it's the context around that $10 that makes it a little bit more questionable. But in terms of the game itself, divorced from the pricing discourse, again, I did enjoy it. It's pretty cool, and there are some really interesting insights into the Switch 2's development. I keep bringing this example up. There's this one section where you read about the Joy-Con straps, and they go in detail about the type of weaving structure that they used to make the straps as reliable and tight as they are. And it's those type of details that I think are really interesting, and they're ones that you would not get in even the most detailed interview, right? It's something that could really only exist in this type of game. I, again, just wish it was free so that more people could see that Switch 2 Welcome Tour isn't really worth mocking in terms of what it offers. It's worth mocking in terms of the price and the value, I suppose, but just in terms of the game itself, it is pretty darn cool. So, I'm sort of conflicted on that one, but I certainly wouldn't give it much of a high rating anyway. I think I gave it a 2.5 on Backlog, so I'm actually below consensus, theoretically, on a game like this. Regardless, those were the two new games that Nintendo released on June 5th, but they also released two Nintendo Switch 2 editions, those being Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom. I'm not going to compile Backlog scores and Metacritic scores for the Switch 2 editions because it doesn't really make sense to me. They're not really games, and also the DLC they add are not often that substantial, so we're just going to mention them in passing. But yeah, Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom Switch 2 editions, pretty darn cool. I mean, it's just mind-blowing to see those games running in 4K 60. And those are two of the greatest games ever made in my eyes, so I'm just glad that we can always have them in pristine quality now. No more Switch 1 limitations, but, nothing crazy. I did like how they were included with NSO. That was nice. I wish they would do that more with Switch 2 editions, but I guess they realized that we're probably going to buy the other ones anyway, especially for the new games. Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, with the fact that they were just graphical updates, were a bit of a harder sell, but I think they are the ones that are looked upon the most positively, not only because they were included with NSO, but also just because it's such a dramatic improvement on Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom. Something like Mario Party Jamboree already looked great on the Switch. It already ran great on the Switch as well. Breath and Tears needed that extra help of the Switch 2 and the extra power that it has, and boy did they make the most of it. So, pretty cool release. I do want to replay Breath of the Wild one day with that new update. Haven't gotten around to it yet, but just cool to have, in the background for the future. Well, just 2 months later, on July 17th, we got what was probably the most beloved game released by Nintendo this year, Donkey Kong Bananza. Bananza is currently sitting at a 91 on Metacritic and a 4.41 on Backlogged. Both of those scores are the highest any Nintendo game got this year. And of course, it was also nominated for Game of the Year. And if one game was going to be pitched as the game to sell the Switch to, the game that justifies upgrading your system, and the game that is getting all the praise in terms of scores and nominations, it certainly deserves to be Donkey Kong Bananza. It is my favorite game Nintendo released this year, and it is really a groundbreaking one. Not only in a punny sense, because DK actually breaks the ground, but also in the colloquial sense, because this game really goes in places that no Nintendo game has, and certainly no DK game has, especially if you consider that crazy final act. And you know it's a good game because I keep getting that itch to do a second playthrough, right? With all of the great games that have come out this holiday season and that are going to come out next year, I really want to fit in some time for another DK Bananza playthrough. And this one I think will have even more replay value than something like Odyssey, because this feels like a game you can really cheese on a speedrun. Odyssey had a big speedrun community, but there weren't as many crazy hacks that you could do. Whereas on Twitter, I see people do crazy movement strats in Bananza, especially once you unlock that elephant power. So I really am excited to dive back into this one and just experience it all again, because it really was a blast and is probably one of the best games Nintendo has ever made. A week later, though, we got something that I don't think people were as excited about, and that is the Super Mario Party Jamboree Switch 2 Edition. Now, this was a Switch 2 Edition that was embroiled in a lot of controversy. Well, controversy is a little strong, but people weren't too excited about this update. First of all, the resolution bump at first was only in the Jamboree TV mode, which meant you could only play in HD resolution in the selected rule sets and those other weird mini-game modes they added. You could not play in HD in something like Koopathlon, which to me was the best part of Mario Party Jamboree besides the boards. Thankfully, they did add that in an update, so now I believe you can play the entire game in full HD, not just Jamboree TV. So that felt like a weird oversight. I was going to do a video on the Jamboree Switch 2 Edition to the point where I actually recorded the whole thing. And in that video that I never released because I didn't think it was that good, I said that I think ND Cube, or Nintendo Cube now, might have just been a little overworked, right? Jamboree came out in October. Apparently they worked on Switch 2 Welcome Tour. And then July 24th, they come out with the Switch 2 edition of Mario Party Jamboree. That's theoretically 3 games in under a year. I think something like a resolution boost to only Jamboree TV is something that is bred out of maybe being a little rushed to meet deadlines for the Switch 2's launch. And they did patch it in eventually, which I think is the important part, because this is a game I'll be playing for years to come. So now that it's fully in HD, I am a little bit more generous towards this Switch 2 edition, because I do appreciate the new rule sets they added, right? Frenzy mode is a really fun one, and tag team mode is pretty cool too. And I would say those should have been included in the base game, but there was also a lot of content in the base game and a lot of rule sets in the base game, so I can't really be too mad that they were in the base game, because there was already so much Mario Party in Mario Party Jamboree. Those were just nice additions for the Switch 2 edition, and I did appreciate those. Can't say I got any mileage out of the Bowser mode or the mouse modes whatsoever, but in terms of just the HD bump and the new rule sets, I don't think it was a total flop for Mario Party Jamboree Switch 2 edition, but I don't think it was a rousing success either. Speaking of games that were not a rousing success, on August 14th, we got Dragon Drive, the weird internally developed game that we did not really know much about before launch or after launch. It just kind of dropped and we all moved on. I played the global test, whatever it was called, before the game came out, and I did not like it whatsoever. It is hard to control, it's awkward, the game is really drab and not very colorful whatsoever. And people seem to agree with me, because this got a 60 on Metacritic and a 2.54 on Backlogged. That makes it the lowest rated console release for Nintendo on Backlog this year, and the second lowest rated Metacritic score for a Nintendo release this year. But yeah, I didn't really like Dragon Drive. I do like the idea of Dragon Drive. I just read the developer interview that they released, and you could tell how much they were just messing around and having fun with this game. It's just a group of developers from throughout Nintendo. It's not like strictly EPD4 or something making this game. And they just had a lot of fun, like, messing around with motion controls and mouse controls, and they said they even played some wheelchair basketball in real life to further help simulate the feeling of playing wheelchair basketball on the Switch 2, and I think that's really cool. Like, I would recommend, even if you hate drag and drive, checking out that developer interview. Nintendo Forecast did a great video on it, sort of further elaborating on some of the stuff they said, because it really is fascinating and makes me a little bit more positive on drag and drive, right? Because ultimately this is, what, a $15 or $20 eShop title that is just a labor of love and passion from some random EPD developers for Nintendo. And even if I don't like the game, I will always support that idea. But I will always be down for silly little projects like this, so I don't hate Drag and Drive. I think it's priced fairly. I think it's, it doesn't anger me like it does some people, but I also don't really like the game. 2 weeks later, we got Kirby and the Forgotten Land Nintendo Switch 2 Edition, and this was another one that I think people didn't really like. It's just remixed Kirby levels, and they're pretty good. I played them, I liked them, and there's a new final boss that's like, whatever. People, again, seemed a little disappointed with the content of this one, and I can understand that. These Switch 2 editions are odd because Nintendo seems to value the DLC portions of them at $10, right? Considering that Prime 4 and Pokemon, as well as Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, all had $10 upgrade paths, which essentially just gave you technological boosts. Sure, Prime 4 had mouse controls, and Breath of the Wild had that weird app thing that they tied in, but for the most part, those Switch 2 editions are just graphical enhancements and frame rate boosts as well. But the $20 ones have those as well as DLC. So what I'm trying to say is that Nintendo seems to be valuing the DLC aspect of this at $10, which means in their minds, they can't really give you that much, because usually their DLC expansions are $20 to $30. The DK one that came out later this year was $20. So are they giving you $10 worth of content? I guess. I don't really like these price conversations because it's all very arbitrary, but I don't think these aren't worth $20 necessarily. They're just kind of underwhelming. It is cool to see Kirby running in, near 4K 60 FPS. It is nice to get some bonus levels and some bonus bosses, but ultimately it's not something that feels super exciting either. Well, a few weeks after Kirby, we got a September Nintendo Direct. Nintendo Direct, September 12th, 2025, and this was a big one. It was an hour long, and it didn't really have too many announcements, especially if you aren't a big Mario fan, but I still found it to be a pretty darn good Direct that set up the first half of 2026 for Nintendo pretty well. We, of course, got the reveal of the Super Mario Galaxy movie, and alongside it, a re-release of Super Mario Galaxy 1+2. We got the announcement of Mario Tennis Fever coming in February, Yoshi and the Mysterious Book coming in the spring, and then for the non-Mario announcements for Nintendo, we got Tomodachi Life Living the Dream getting given a spring 2026 window. We got Hyrule Warriors and Prime 4 release dates, and then we got Fire Emblem Fortune's Weave coming 2026 as the closer. And as I said in my discussion video, I did really enjoy this Direct. There was a lot of cool stuff in it. I mean, I was super excited for the first sports game on the Switch 2. I was really looking forward to that, especially because Camelot hasn't done anything for almost 5 years at this point. I was really excited to see what the next 2D Yoshi was going to look like, and we did get a look at it, and it looks great. And of course, I was super excited to see a new Fire Emblem game, especially after the solid but disappointing Engage, and the fact that there aren't that many RPGs on the Switch 2, period, and there are none from Nintendo. There aren't even Switch 2 patches for games like Xenoblade and the other Fire Emblems that released on the Switch 1. So the Switch 2 is in desperate need of some RPGs, and I think Fire Emblem will help satiate that. I think Monolith will have something in 2026 or 2027. So we're starting to get on track in regards to RPGs on the Switch 2. And it was just nice to see Fire Emblem. It looks great. Graphically, it looks terrific. Way better than the Switch games. I love the Roman aesthetic that they're going with. It's really cool and suits Fire Emblem perfectly. And of course, there's the tie into Three Houses that's yet to be cleared up as to, is this a sequel, a prequel, alternate timeline? We don't know, but I'm super excited to find out because Three Houses was great. I really think this would have been one of the best Directs if they had that S-tier announcement to close out the Direct. Something like a Smash, even though that's probably years off, or a 3D Mario or whatever. But that didn't happen, so I would say it was a solid B to B+. But I did think the reaction to it online was sort of insane, because as we'll get to at the end of this video, it lined out a pretty impressive first half of 2026 for Nintendo, again, just in terms of published games, right? You can talk about the quality of the games all you want, but in terms of output, they're doing a really good job right now. And I think that was only further highlighted with that September 12th Direct. And also, something that went totally underreported is the fact that Hyrule Warriors End Prime 4 made 2025. A lot of people didn't think that was going to happen. So that was almost the most important thing. The fact that two of their biggest holiday releases were in fact coming out during the holiday. Oh, and I am realizing that I just forgot, Pokemon Pokopia was also announced for release in, well, they just said 2026, but in the Japanese trailer, I think it said spring 2026, and of course, that was revealed to be true a few months later. But to be honest, I'm not really interested in that game. Anything with an internal clock, I'm kind of out on. That's why I'm almost not excited for this new Animal Crossing update and not really excited for the next Animal Crossing. Like, I play games at night, okay? I play games before I go to bed. I don't want my Animal Crossing town or my Pokopia town to always be dark and gloomy. I want to see sunshine, damn it. That's why I love Stardew Valley, because it just lets you do your own thing. Regardless, I thought it was a pretty good Direct, and again, Nintendo still has more stuff they're going to have in 2026. So we can talk a little bit about that at the end, but that's not all they're going to release next year, and I think we all know that. All right, I had to check my fantasy football team there. Anyway, Switch 2 Direct, September 12th, pretty good, whatever. Discourse. We did get something that released on December 12th, though, and that was the DK Bananza DLC, which gave us DK Island to roam around in, and Emerald Rush, a roguelike side mode for DK Bananza. And when I saw this trailer, I was like, sweet, DK Bananza DLC. I bought it immediately when it came out, and I literally haven't played it yet. I haven't played a second of this DLC. It seems cool, and it does seem like something that could be fun, especially just roaming around DK Island and collecting all those statues of different DK characters, and there's some really cool references, like they had Lanky Kong as a statue, but for whatever reason, probably just because there's been so many great games that have come out over the last few months, I've just had no time to try out this DLC. I'll probably get to it next year at some point, and it does seem cool, even though a lot of people did not seem to like it. A lot of people apparently are just anti-DLC, which, whatever, I'm not even, it's a fact of life that games get DLC. I don't know what to tell you. Speaking of things I didn't play, September 25th brought us a surprising release of Fire Emblem Shadows, a mobile game from the Fire Emblem series that is a social deduction type of game. This has a 37 on Metacritic and a 1.82 on Backlogged. That is really low. Just for reference, Nintendo has 32 pages of games on Backlogged, and each page has 60 results. That means on Backlog there are 1,920 games, 1,920 titles that have ratings on them. And of those 1,920 titles, only 5 of them are rated lower than Fire Emblem Shadows. Donkey Kong Jr. Math, which is a little disrespectful to Donkey Kong Jr. Math, I'm just gonna put it out there. Mario Tennis Ultra Smash, WarioWare Snapped, which was the downloadable WarioWare game for the DSi, I don't remember that at all. Amiibo Tap Nintendo's Greatest Hits, which was the game that you could only play with an amiibo, and it gave you like a demo of a retro Nintendo game. And Animal Crossing Amiibo Festival, which I would say is widely considered the worst game Nintendo has ever made. So it's an elite company here is what I'm trying to say. Fire Emblem Shadows at a 1.82 is among the GOATs. And I don't mean GOATs in terms of Tom Brady, I mean GOATs in terms of Jamarcus Russell. These are some real bad games that it's in conversation with. I, of course, have not touched this game. I mean, I wasn't really into a mobile Fire Emblem game anyway, but the moment I heard it was bad, I was like, yeah, there's no way I'm even downloading this onto my phone. No offense. But hey, if this is what Intelligent Systems needs to do to get some extra dough so we can just keep getting Fire Emblem and Paper Mario and WarioWare. That's all right by me. Make your gacha games. I don't care. Just keep them on mobile. Keep them out of my sight. To me, that sounds like a fair trade, but I don't care about this game at all. And it seems like most people are in agreement with me on that point. Well, just a week later, we got into the holiday season for Nintendo with a release of Super Mario Galaxy 1+2, a controversial release because of, drumroll please, its price. $70 for 2 Wii games was certainly not the easiest pill to swallow. Thankfully, I had an Amazon gift card laying around, so I was able to pick this one up. And I don't regret it. I mean, I love both of these games. I did find myself a little bit lower on Galaxy 2 than I expected. It's been a while since I replayed it. There are just so many 2D segments in Galaxy 2, to the point where it really irked me, because that movement engine is just not made for 2D. It's made for 3D environments, and when Galaxy 2 is in 3D, it might be the greatest 3D platformer of all time. But there's so many 2D sections that are just not that fun, and that brings down the game for me. After 100%ing Galaxy 2 again, I went back to Galaxy 1, and I immediately was like, yeah, this is just so much better, because most of those levels are completely open, and I don't know if there's many, if any, 2D sections. There are more linear sections in a 3D environment, sure, but Galaxy 2 literally has a bunch of side-scrolling sections, and it's like, especially back in the day when Nintendo released a new Super Mario Bros. Game every other year, we have enough side-scrolling Mario. I don't come to 3D Mario for side-scrollers, and that's what kind of irked me about Galaxy 2, but the remasters are really solid. There's a lot of redone textures. Obviously, they have 4K 60 support with HDR, which is a really nice touch, and boy, do those games look great with all of those features applied. For the record, this game did get an 87 on Metacritic and a 4.1 on Backlogged, which would make it one of the higher rated games on both of those websites for Nintendo's 2025. Sort of a funny thing, like, do you review the games as they are? Do you review the collection on Switch 2? Do you review the value proposition? Because those are 3 very different things. So I don't even know if it's relevant to include those details, but I did. Again, I had a lot of fun with Galaxy 1 and 2 this holiday. And if you can find this on sale, I mean, if you can find this for $50 or $60, I think that's a really good deal for Galaxy 1+2. At $70, it's a little steep, but these are redone versions. Like, Nintendo did not give themselves enough credit, I think, for what NST did. There are a lot of cool little features. Obviously, there are also new book pages, which I don't really care about, but that's a cool addition as well. Overall, I'm just glad we can play Galaxy 2 on the Switch. That's really where I'm at with that collection. Just 2 weeks later, though, we got the biggest release of the holiday season and perhaps of the year for Nintendo. Pokemon Legends ZA. This game came in at a 78 on Metacritic and a 3.6 on Backlogged, which isn't very high for Nintendo standards, but for Pokemon, it's pretty good. This, of course, was a very divisive game in the Pokemon community because of the flat buildings and the new battle system and blah, blah, blah. I didn't pick this game up just because there was so much going on in October. 2 weeks before that, Ghost of Yote came out, and like I mentioned, I was still playing through Galaxy 2. That took me about a month to 100%. So I just didn't have time for Pokemon Legends ZA, and I don't have enough money to be buying games I don't have time for, right? So I'll pick this up next year at some point, probably, but I didn't get to play it this year. It looks good, though. From what I've seen and from what people I trust have said, it seems pretty darn fun. And Pokemon Legends Arceus was my favorite game, period, in the Pokemon franchise, so I'm sure Legends ZA is good. Speaking of games I do not own right now, Hyrule Warriors Age of Imprisonment came out on November 6th, just a few weeks after Pokemon Legends ZA. This one came in at a 79 on Metacritic and a 3.71 on Backlogged, though that number is a little bit skewed because there haven't been that many reviews for it, so maybe if there are more ratings in the future, that number will rise. Sort of how Backlog does it, they're weighted. But yeah, 79 isn't the highest necessarily for a Nintendo game, but it is the highest rated Hyrule Warriors game in the series, so pretty good accomplishment there. I didn't pick this one up either because there were some indie games that came out around that time that I wanted to get to, that I was really excited for, so I didn't pick this one up either. I will pick it up eventually. Like I said, I do like the Hyrule Warriors games. This one kind of just didn't excite me as much, though. I don't know why. The marketing was sort of weird for this one. They didn't show off a lot of the game. And though it seems like people who played it liked it, they didn't really give casual observers like myself any reason to believe that it was going to be anything all that special. So I just didn't feel convinced to pick this one up over a game like Windswept or over a game like Possessors, which were some indie games that came out around that time. But it seems pretty cool as well. Here's a game I did pick up this holiday. That's Kirby Air Riders, which released on November 20th, just 2 weeks after Hyrule Warriors. This game is currently sitting at an 80 on Metacritic and a 4.38 on Backlogged, which is pretty darn high. That's one of the higher rated Nintendo games of all time and the second highest rated one of 2025. So you can see the discrepancy here. The hardcore really loves this game, but the general critic consensus isn't all that high. And it makes sense, right? This is a very weird game and a very hard one to gel with. But if you give it a shot and if you give it time, it is absolutely addicting. This game has been my life for the past 2 weeks. It has taken over for me. I've played it every day. I love it so much. Every part of it is just perfection. From the racing itself, which is super tactile and satisfying and easy to pick up but hard to master, to the single player mode, which is this arcadey style playlist sort of mode where you play a bunch of different challenges and fight some really, really cool bosses, or City Trial, which is better than it has ever been with the introduction of more players and more, events and more challenges and all of this different stuff. Or that the My Machine feature is so darn robust that people managed to make Big Guy into a machine in Kirby Air Riders. Of course, I bought that immediately after seeing it on the market. But yeah, even as someone who somewhat enjoyed the first Kirby Air Ride when I played it on an emulator, and obviously respects and loves the work of Masahiro Sakurai, I did not expect this game to be as fun as it has been for me. DK Bonanza is better, in my opinion. It is the best game Nintendo released this year. But boy, does Kirby Air Riders have more of an argument for that title than I thought it ever could have. Incredible game. 2 weeks after that, and about the time I am recording this video, Metroid Prime 4 Beyond released. It's got a Metacritic score of 81, and it's so early in the game's life that its backlog score is all sorts of wonky, so there's no reason to include it here. I, of course, have not played this game because it just came out today, but people were really scared about that 81 on Metacritic, and I will say it makes sense to be a little bit frightened. It is the lowest rated Metroid game besides like Other M and Pinball. Like, since Metacritic started, every mainline Metroid game has had at least, I believe, an 88 on Metacritic, right? Prime 1, 2, and 3 were all in the 90s, Fusion was in the 90s, and Dread was at an 88. So Prime 4 Beyond at an 81 is a significant downgrade. With all that said, from what I've seen and from what I've heard from people who are big Prime fans, it still seems like this is going to be a really good game, and I am excited to dig into it. The game looks absolutely stunning. The gameplay looks like classic Metroid Prime, and although the NPCs might be annoying, I think people are really blowing them out of proportion. There's no way they're as annoying as some people are saying. Calling this game written like a Marvel movie or whatever. First of all, I don't even think that's such a terrible fate. For Metroid, it's sort of a weird fit, but, I like when Spider-Man cracks jokes sometimes. Have a little bit of fun and whimsy. What the heck? I don't know, but even then, the Marvel movies can get pretty ridiculous. I seriously doubt that Metroid Prime 4 is evoking that sort of writing style and tone, but I've yet to play it, so I can't really talk. Well, that was Nintendo's 2025, and if you tabulate it all, they had 17 releases this year, if you count Switch 2 editions, remakes, and remasters. So that's counting all the Switch 2 editions, that's counting Nintendo Switch 2 Welcome Tour and Dragon Drive, that's counting Galaxy 1+2 as one game, and Xenoblade Chronicles Definitive Edition, but 17 published games in 1 year is a lot. And even though I didn't like all of them, I did like a good few of them. So I guess now is the time to ask the question, Was 2025 a good year for Nintendo? And I kind of think the answer is almost objectively yes. I mean, they have been on a roll, just in terms of pure output. In this holiday season, they released about 2 games a month. Like, that is pretty wild, especially considering they're launching new hardware in that same holiday season. And again, all of the games I've played, I've really liked, right? Like, well, besides Dragon Drive and Switch 2 Welcome Tour, but DK Bananza is terrific. Kirby Air Riders is terrific. Mario Kart World is flawed, but still really damn good. And even Super Mario Galaxy 1+2 was fun to play, even if it's like, whatever, right? It's an old game. And I'm sure when I get my hands on Legends EA and Hyrule Warriors and Metroid Prime 4, I will still enjoy them, even if they will be a little bit lesser than some of the more marquee releases for Nintendo this year. And if you were down on Nintendo's 2025 because of pricing or general controversy, I can't say you're wrong, right? It was a weird and wacky year for the big N, but just in terms of the game side of things, which I like to talk about, I'm not a freaking economics channel, I'm a gaming channel. Just from the gaming perspective, this was a pretty darn good year and a pretty great launch for the Switch 2. I think people forget how bad the Wii U and 3DS launches were for Nintendo. I tweeted it out recently. I guess I should try and find it. So, in the first 8 months of the Wii U, Nintendo released New Super Mario Bros. U, Nintendo Land, Lego City Undercover, which was published by them, and Game & Wario. That was it for the first 8 months of the Wii U. We're not even in month 8 of the Switch 2 yet. For the 3DS in its first 8 months, you had Pilot Wings Resort, Nintendogs Plus Cats, Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time 3D, which was cool but a remake, and Star Fox 64 3D, which is the same thing. The 3DS launch, for those who don't remember, was so bad that Nintendo had to, apologize and cut the prices for the 3DS in the holiday season while also launching Mario Kart and 3D Mario for it at the same time. It was a disaster. And maybe there were other reasons why the 3DS's launch was so bad, right? The fact that back then, $250 or whatever it was a lot for a handheld, go figure. Nowadays, it's like you're jumping for joy if something's priced that much. God, where have we gone? But yeah, whether it was the price or the weird marketing or just the fact that there weren't any freaking games released for it in the first few months, the 3DS flopped, right? And I don't think it's a coincidence the Switch 2 is soaring with the release lineup it has had. Mario Kart World, DK Bananza, Kirby Air Riders, Hyrule Warriors Definitive Edition, all in the first, 6 months of the console's life cycle? I guess it's more like 5, because Kirby came out in November. That's month 5. People bring up the Switch 2's incredible first year, and it was objectively incredible, but a lot of the games that came out for the Switch 2 in its first year did not come out in its first 5 months. Mario Odyssey, for example, came out in month 8 of the Switch. Xenoblade came out in month 10. Kirby, I believe, just made the cut in the last month of the first year. I'm not saying you have to like the games that Nintendo has released in the first 5 months of the Switch 2. But from an objective perspective, their output has been stellar. And that is, of course, without counting Legends ZA and Prime 4, which are big releases that play much better on the Switch 2. And obviously, I'm not saying you have to like any of those games, or you can't be disappointed that Nintendo didn't have another big game like a Splatoon or Animal Crossing or Monolith Soft or Luigi's Mansion or something. But if you look objectively and compare the Switch 2's first 5 months to basically every other Nintendo system, it is at worst the second best. The Switch has an argument over it, and I would take the Switches over it just because Breath of the Wild was a game that changed the gaming industry, not just Nintendo. But just from an output perspective, it's been a good first few months of the Switch 2's launch. I mean, compare it to something like the PS5 or the Xbox in its first few years, which had nothing going for it in terms of exclusives. The Xbox didn't have a big exclusive for its series lineup until, Halo Infinite in 2021, and that was a complete flop. Psychonauts came out for the Xbox, but it also came out, I believe, on the Xbox One, and was also out on PlayStation. So that wasn't a big deal, even though I love that game. And for PlayStation, you had cool things like Returnal in the first year, and I believe Demon's Souls was a PS5 exclusive. But in terms of big, hard hitters, we didn't really get any for the PS5 until 2023 with Spider-Man. And the same thing is true for Xbox, which didn't really get a huge hitter in terms of an exclusive game until Forza 5. And both of those games were years after launch. So again, I'm not trying to defend the billion dollar company. What I am saying is that if you look around the industry, Nintendo is doing this a lot better than a lot of other companies are. And I think that is the perspective that is needed in a discussion like this. And again, if you look towards their 2026, which people have maligned on the internet, especially after that Nintendo Direct, they have a pretty good 2026 going, and like I keep saying in videos, it will only get more rounded out as the year goes on. What year since COVID has Nintendo not announced something and released it a few months later? Coming into 2025 for Nintendo, there was the DK port and the Xenoblade port dated, and then Prime 4 and Legend ZA undated. And then by the end of the year, we had a new Mario Kart, a new 3D Donkey Kong, a new Kirby Air Riders, a new Hyrule Warriors. Like, there will be more 2026 announcements. But let's run through the games slated to come out for Nintendo in 2026. On January 15th, you've got the Animal Crossing Switch 2 Edition and free update. On February 12th, you've got Mario Tennis Fever. On February 27th, you've got Pokemon Day, which I bring up because I think there could be a shadow drop of Pokemon Champions on Pokemon Day. That game has to come out before August because it's being used for the actual Pokemon Championships in August. And I believe some leaks made it sound like it was going to come out in the winter. So I wouldn't be surprised if that's a Pokemon Day shadow drop or it comes out a little bit soon thereafter. But given that Pokopia comes out on March 5th, I think it would make sense to shadow drop that game. Again, Pokemon Pokopia is coming out on March 5th, 2026. And then we have some games that are without actual concrete dates. Super Mario Bros. Wonder's Switch 2 Edition is coming out in spring. Yoshi and the Mysterious Book is also coming out in spring, and Tomodachi Life Living the Dream is as well coming out this spring. In terms of games without any sort of window, you've got Pokemon Champions, which I mentioned is probably going to come out in the winter. The Duskbloods, which I said in my last video, I could see coming out before June, just because FromSoft rarely releases games in the second half of the year. We've got Rhythm Heaven Groove, which you would assume would be a second half game just because we didn't see it in September. But they announced this game in March. Are they really going to do a 2-year rollout or year and a half rollout for freaking Rhythm Heaven? Like, that's just such an odd choice to me. I still kind of think it could come out by June. And then you've got Fire Emblem Fortune's Weave, which I think could be out by the end of August. That's sort of what I was expecting. I was almost surprised they didn't give it some sort of window. I thought it might be spring. But obviously, Three Houses came out in August. They showed a lot of gameplay, a lot of cutscenes. That game looks really good. I'd be surprised if this is like a November game for Nintendo. I think it could be out by August. So all of the games Nintendo has announced could feasibly come out before September. And then you have Splatoon Raiders, which I think will come out next year, but I think that's going to be a holiday game. I think that's the one game that is locked in for the holiday season for Nintendo. I can't imagine that game slips to 2027. Considering they announced it in 2025, and although they didn't show us much, they at least showed us like some gameplay. It'd be pretty weird if that was a 2-year hype cycle as well. So I think that will come out at some point next year. September feels like a good month for that. And then we talked about Pokemon Day earlier. You are 100% getting the 10th generation of Pokemon in the fall. No doubt about it. Maybe it's not November to try to avoid GTA, but it will be in the fall. We will get Gen 10 in the fall. It will be shown off during Pokemon Day. So that will be another big hitter for Nintendo this holiday. That is happening. Like, I know we don't want to say absolutely because it's not out yet, but we're going to get Gen 10 in 2026. So if you count Splatoon Raiders and Gen 10 of Pokemon, that's 12 releases on the calendar for Nintendo. That, of course, counts the 2 Switch 2 editions and Pokemon Champions, which is also on mobile. But that's a lot for Nintendo. And again, I really do think we're going to find out about some stuff we don't know about, right? Whether it be Switch 2 editions, or I think we could still see 1 or 2 bigger holiday games. Luigi's Mansion, Monolith, maybe a 3D Mario. Feels like that's still a year or two out, but I really do think 2026 is still going to be a pretty big year for Nintendo. And I think some of the hand-wringing about the fact that they haven't announced a lot for 2026 yet is both wrong just in terms of sheer output and also a little bit misguided given that they've announced things just months ahead of time. Basically, every announcement they've had in the last half decade since COVID has been announced no more than a year before release. So I don't think that's going to change, and I think we will see some big announcements made in that first or second direct of 2026. But that is it for my look back at 2025 for Nintendo. I suppose I should give a grade to close this video off, and I think I would give an A- to Nintendo for 2025. The game releases were there. It was a little awkward in terms of communication, and obviously there were some weird controversies and stuff. But in terms of directs and in terms of releases, I think it was a pretty stellar year for Nintendo. And ultimately, no matter how it happened, they've released two of my favorite Nintendo games this year in DK Bonanza and Kirby Air Riders. But none of that is important. Let me know in the comments, what did you think of Nintendo's 2025? Do you agree with me that it was a great year for the publisher, or do you think it was disappointing, especially considering the expectations a lot of people had coming into this year? And be sure to grade them. Give me a letter in the comments of how you think Nintendo did in 2025. If this video does well, maybe I'll do a Sony one, because I also have a PlayStation. I don't know. They're not as interesting to talk about, are they? Not a lot happened this year for Sony, but maybe I'll do that. If you're interested in that, tell me in the comments as well. It's a freaking party down there, and I'll try to respond to as many as I can. Let's get a discussion, a discourse going in the comments below. Make sure to like the video, subscribe, hit that big, fat button. As I keep saying in these videos, I'm working on some stuff on the side. It is December, which means my top 10 games of 2025 video is on the way. I have another smaller top 10 type of video coming. I actually have two ideas for top 10-ish videos for 2025 that may or may not happen, but I think could be cool. And then there's another video that's more of a long-term project that I've been actively recording, and you're going to see that at the end of the month. So if you don't want to miss any of that, make sure to subscribe and hit that freaking bell so you don't miss anything going on with the channel. Follow me on Backlogged. I talked about it a lot in this video. I do reviews on there. I do lists, all sorts of stuff. Follow me on Backlog to see what I'm playing, see what I'm liking, disliking. I recently did a review for Mafia 2, so if you want to see that, you're going to have to go to the frickin' website. I'll link it down below. Make sure to send this video to a big Nintendrone or a big Nintendo hater. And with all that said, I'll see you guys in the next one. You see that? Can I zoom in? No, I can't. Look at that. Look at that. Isn't that cool? It said it came with two posters. It said on the front... I got the magazine. Where is it? 2 free posters inside. 2 free posters. That might be mirrored for you. 2 free posters. No, it's 1 double-sided poster. Not the same thing. Who are these people even? Veja Agency? Not the same thing. So, a little bit disappointing, but again, great guides in here. They still make this stuff. Unofficial, but what are you going to do? See you in the next one. Moon.